The first Democratic presidential primary debate this year was the one that happened in Las Vegas. That was the one where Jim Webb and Link Chafee were still running around. Hi, guys. That debate, with 5 Democrats on stage, that drew 15 million viewers. The second Democratic debate was last month. They held it on a Saturday night in Iowa at the exact same time that the undefeated Iowa Hawkeyes were taking on the Minnesota Golden Gophers in a blockbuster college football game. Did I mention that the game and the debate were both in Iowa, both starting at the same time on a Saturday night? That debate shaved about half off the audience from the first debate. That one brought in about 8.5 million viewers. The third one was this past weekend, the Saturday before Christmas. It brought in even fewer viewers than the previous one. Nielsen numbers look like it's roughly 7.85 million people who watched Saturday night. And, of course, the Republicans have been putting up blockbuster ratings for their zillions of primetime, highly promoted debates, some of which have had over 20 million people watching them. But look at this. Compare these ratings to 2012. Remember, in 2012, President Obama was running for re-election, so there's no Democratic Party debates, right? It's just the Republicans holding their hilarious, riveting, bizarro 2012 primary with Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich and all the rest of them. I mean, in 2012, the Republican debates were the best show on television by a mile. And I say that as a person with a TV show on television. Everybody was watching the Republican debates in 2012. You could not turn away. But compare the numbers. More people watched the Democratic debate this past Saturday than watched any of the Republican debates in 2012. What? More people watched the Democratic debate this past Saturday than almost every other Democratic debate in 2008, which was the Barack Obama-Hillary Clinton blockbuster year. There were 15 debates that year on the Democratic side. The 4th highest rated debate that year was held on MSNBC. It drew 7.77 million viewers. This Saturday debate, this snoozer, Saturday night before Christmas, beat that number. Did I mention that was Hillary versus Barack? So, yeah, the Democrats have buried their debate schedule in a haystack, and it is impossible to find this year. Compared with the Republicans this year, the numbers of people watching the Democratic debates are much smaller. But compared with previous years, even this year's Democratic debate numbers are ginormous. I mean, yeah, the Republican numbers are breaking the scale, but the Democratic numbers are historically huge. Americans are into this election. But what do the huge debate ratings mean for who's likely to win the election? It's hard to know. It is hard to tell at this point whether big debate audiences are going to help or hurt either party. I do have one metric, though, one last metric, though, that I want you to look at. Check this out. During the last Democratic debate, this Saturday, this snooze fest in New Hampshire, the Saturday before Christmas, the candidate who attracted the largest number of new Twitter followers over the course of that debate was Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders went up more than anybody else on Twitter during the Democratic debate. During the last Republican debate, the Republican debate last Tuesday in Las Vegas, where 18 million people watched during the last Republican debate. You want to know who the candidate was who attracted the largest number of new Twitter followers during the Republican debate? Also Bernie Sanders. He had a great night that night, too, on Republican debate night. There's one clear metric that shows which candidate did their campaign the most good over the course of the last Republican debate and over the course of the last Democratic debate. And in both instances, for whatever reason, it was Bernie. Ratings schmatings. This race this year is just freaking weird. Weird and awesomely unpredictable, and I love my job. Best new thing in the world, and today it comes from a very unlikely place, the United States Senate, which, despite themselves, managed to do something constructive right before they went home for Christmas. It also resulted in the best new thing in the world tonight, which is a picture I will show you in a second. The context here is this man, the first Iraq War veteran ever elected to the U.S. Congress. Patrick Murphy, captain in the 82nd Airborne, combat veteran, winner of the Bronze Star. He came back from Baghdad in 2004, decided to run for Congress in 2005. He beat a Republican incumbent, went to Washington as an anti-Iraq war vet. He held on for 2 terms in a conservative district. He ended up losing his seat in the big red Republican wave of 2010. Even though he knew he was from a very tough district for a Democrat, Patrick Murphy led with his heart, including making himself the lead advocate for the legislative repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. as a straight man and a combat veteran representing a conservative district. He did that even though he knew he would pay for it at home. Patrick Murphy is a fundamentally good person. He has done a show focused on veterans issues here at MSNBC. You may have seen it. It's called Taking the Hill. He's also been a frequent guest on this show. In May, you might remember, there was a terrible train derailment in Philadelphia, which killed 8 people, wounded more than 200 people on that train. Congressman Patrick Murphy was on board that train when it derailed. He helped people out of the train. He kicked out emergency windows. He helped the first responders find the wounded. He then stayed there basically as an on-scene correspondent through the night and into the next day, helping people and helping explain what happened. He's just a great, great guy. And right before the Senate went home for the weekend and for the Christmas break, last order of business, they confirmed good old Patrick Murphy to be Undersecretary of the United States Army. Which brings us to the aforementioned best new thing in the world. Because whether or not you like Patrick Murphy as much as I do, and boy do I like that guy, whether or not you have any particular feeling about him being our new Undersecretary of the United States Army, inarguably, this is the best new thing in the world. The photo that we got today of how his family felt about the proceedings in the Senate where Daddy got confirmed. Did I mention that the vote was late in the day on Friday? Last order of business. Yes, it's exciting for Daddy to be confirmed as Undersecretary of the Army, but also, can I use my iPad, Mommy? There's Fruit Ninja to be played. Congratulations to Congressman, now Undersecretary Patrick Murphy. Congratulations to your family, sir. May all your achievements be this riveting for your kids. Best new thing in the world. Truly awesome. That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow.
One day after Russian President Vladimir Putin had some very nice things to say about Donald Trump, the GOP frontrunner went on national television and reciprocated.
Do you like Vladimir Putin's comments about you?
Sure. When people call you brilliant, it's always good, especially when the person heads up Russia.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, also as a person that kills journalists, political opponents, and
invades countries.
And invades countries. Obviously, that it would be a concern, would it not?
He's running this country, and at least he's a leader, you know, unlike what we have in this country.
Yeah, but again, he kills journalists that don't agree with him.
Well, I think our country does plenty of killing also, Joe. So, you know. There's a lot of stupidity going on in the world right now, Joe. A lot of killing going on, a lot of stupidity, and that's the way it is. But you didn't ask me the question. You asked me a different question, so that's fine.
I'm confused. So, I mean, you obviously condemn Vladimir Putin killing journalists and political opponents, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to be clear about what kind of a leader President Putin is, Human Rights Watch pointed out that in the years since Vladimir Putin's return to the presidency in 2012, the Russian government has unleashed a crackdown on civil society unprecedented in the country's post-Soviet history. Trump's praise for Putin has Republicans lining up to denounce him. Jeb Bush tweeted, "Does Donald even know Putin backs Iran, Assad? Does he care? We must stand up to Putin, not coddle him. Hashtag chaos candidate." Mitt Romney went as far as to defend President Obama in order to attack Trump. Important distinction. Thug Putin kills journalists and opponents. Our presidents kill terrorists and enemy combatants. And conservative columnist Bill Kristol perhaps came down the hardest. Isn't Donald Trump the most anti-American presidential candidate in both parties? Joining me now is Robert Costa, national political reporter for The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Robert, okay, is there a line somewhere that Donald Trump can cross where his candidacy would actually be hobbled?
When it comes to Putin, there's a hawkish impulse in the Republican Party, and he's going directly against it. And I think it's startling the GOP, especially the establishment, the elite, because being against Putin is such a core part of the Republican foreign policy argument. But when it comes to his position, he's okay with Russia fighting in Syria and taking on ISIS without any American intervention.
Do you think that the Putin comments play well among the base? Because in many of these other previous instances, Trump says something inflammatory, the establishment expresses its concern with it, and it ends up strengthening Trump's position. I wonder if the same is true in this particular instance.
In this instance, I think you're seeing Trump linking himself to what he sees as a projection of strength, regardless of Putin's human rights abuses and all of the actions he has taken in Russia. Trump just sees in his mind a strong leader, and he does this throughout the campaign. Whenever he sees strength, he tries to connect the Trump campaign with it.
So, Robert, you reported first that the RNC is making some plans for a brokered convention. You're seeing a pile-on here from the establishment vis-a-vis Trump's comments. Why aren't more establishment candidates coming out and saying something about Trump? And do you think this could be the beginning?
Not so much. It's late December, mid-December. We're seeing scattered tweets from Republican leaders. We're not seeing a financial effort against Donald Trump. This is an establishment that doesn't really want to spend the money on Trump. And the only way at this point, it seems, to beat Trump is to actually beat him when the voting begins.
Does Jeb Bush stand any chance of increasing his odds of becoming the nominee by attacking Trump?
It may be one of his only paths to the nomination, because in a crowded field with many mainstream candidates competing in New Hampshire and elsewhere, he's looking long-term. He could perhaps be the anti-Trump candidate who was willing to take him on now when others were not.
But isn't he competing more with establishment candidates like Marco Rubio than he is with Donald Trump?
He is, and now Rubio and Senator Cruz are battling each other on immigration and other issues. And so Bush has to find a way to define his candidacy. And being anti-Trump, that gives him some buzz. He's getting mentioned in the headlines, and that's a development compared to a few weeks ago.
So, Robert, you think #chaos candidate is enough to get Jeb Bush a couple more percentage points?
No, but it's maybe enough to get him a few more dollars with donors who are paying close attention.
And that is important. Robert Costa with the Washington Post and MS.